children, the biggest load of claptrap I've ever heard in my life. If you, hear me out, if you were living in apparently this war-torn country, hear me out, right, and you had a wife and child, because I've desperately wanted to ask somebody from the Labour Party this for a long time, would you, A, bring your wife and child to make them safe, or would you, in fact, leave them there and cross 7 safe countries so that you came to England under the guise in your mind, Sam, that you speak the language or because we...
Welcome back to Julian Discourse. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Have you ever wondered how politicians justify a completely broken border system? In a staggering exchange on TalkTV, a Labour MP tells Jeremy Kyle that undocumented migrants bypass safe European countries to reach the UK simply because Britain colonized the world centuries ago. It is a stunning display of elite disconnect, essentially telling frustrated tax-paying citizens that they deserve the crisis. Watch this.
Do you believe we give too much, we're too attractive, with a land that gives more? That's the attraction, because I tell you what, mate, there's a lot of people that think we give too much, loads of them.
So I mean, look at what they get. If you are an asylum seeker in an asylum hotel, you get £10 a week, or less actually, it's £9 something a week to pay for your sort of toiletries and essentials. If you're an asylum seeker that's in a self-catering situation, you're given less than £50 a week. This is far less than a British person on the welfare state. So I don't think it's about what they're given. Actually, I think that's a myth, and I think the conditions that they live in are much harsher than most people realise. What I think there is a
4-star hotels harsh?
Well, but by the time those hotels are turned into asylum hotels, believe me, they are not 4-star. That is not the experience.
Let's agree to disagree, but I don't need...
That's not the experience of living in one. But I think what we do need to look at is what are the pull factors. And I think there's 2 big pull factors. One is that they speak the English language, you know, because we spent a couple of centuries going around the world colonising it and teaching everyone our language.
There's the reason that the Labour Party will forever allow people to come to this country.
They've got a network of people that speak our language, and the other is that there is a black economy, and we need to deal with the black economy.
Mate, listen, we'll agree to disagree, but you've just said it. You've just said what I've always suspected is central to many people's view, is that, as you said, we went around the world colonising, and that's why we should accept. And listen, you have your right to your view. People listening will have their right to their view. What?
That is why it's a pull factor for them to come. They want to live in a country where they can speak the language, where they've already got a support network.
Half of them can't speak English when they...
Come on, what we need to do as well is ramp up. We need to ramp up the raids of illegal working.
Sam, you're not telling me a majority of migrants who come to this country can speak English, are you?
A lot of them come because they feel they can work better in the English language than they can in many of the European languages.
Explain to me then why they don't bring their wives and children. There was a man from the Labour Party who used to be Chief Secretary to Keir Starmer called Darren Jones, who on Newsnight, because I was watching the programme, said the right don't understand this. 90%, he said, of those boats are full of women and children. The biggest load of claptrap I've ever heard in my life. If you, hear me out, if you were living in apparently this war-torn country, hear me out, right, and you had a wife and child, because I've desperately wanted to ask somebody from the Labour Party this for a long time, would you, A, bring your wife and child to make them safe, or would you, in fact, leave them there and cross 7 safe countries so that you came to England under the guise in your mind, Sam, that you speak the language or because we colonised your land? They're coming here, mate, because we get... Why don't they stay in France? It's safe, because you said it yourself. You said, oh, asylum hotels aren't great. They're better than a French tent, aren't they, on the beach? We give too much, mate. And all I'm saying is, in the past, maybe this doesn't sound right with you or sit right, but I think in the past, as a country, we did and do loads. But I have to put to all politicians this. We're skint. Inflation this morning, 2.9%. Over £100 billion a year on interest simply to cover debts we can't afford. I'm not blaming you for those debts right now. I'm blaming all governments. What I'm saying is, and I can't get this phrase out of my head and it's going to sound terrible and you're going to hate me, shouldn't we be looking at home first before we look abroad? Shouldn't we be saying to the people that you sit there in Bishopswalk and say, oh, Brits aren't doing that badly, they're only getting £10 in migrant hotels. I went to Bournemouth and I put this out and people were like, oh, my God, that's true. I went to Bournemouth 2 weeks ago and took my son for his driving test, a theory test. Bournemouth was full of young migrant men walking up and down, drinking, smoking and leering, to the detriment, don't care what you say, Harry Redknapp came on with me, completely agreed with me, to the detriment of what was once a beautiful town. That is not good for those people. I don't believe that those young men came here to build great lives. Where are their wives? Why did they throw their papers in the sea? And why, seemingly, with respect to you, Sam, are we, in the eyes of many, treating them better than we're treating our own voting, tax-paying public?
What confuses me about your question is you still seem to think that that there's a difference between you and me in the degree to which we want this to be happening. There's not. We both want there to be 0 small boats crossings. But you're asking the question, so why are they mostly men? I mean, firstly, that there are a lot of women and girls, but you are right. I think that there is a much higher proportion of young men. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that in a conflict situation, they tend to be the most likely to be killed and recruited, but also it's because, as you know very well, a lot of these people are coming as economic migrants, or it's because they believe that if they make the dangerous crossing, they can then bring their family. And that's why one of the things this government has done, as I say, we need to disrupt the business model and make it less attractive. We have worked and got an agreement at the European Court of Human Rights called the Chenonceau Agreement. Maybe you should cover it, where people cannot appeal to the right to a family life to bring family members in a way that they used to be able to do. That is one of the changes that we have made. Another thing that's important to note is the amount of people who come because they believe that they can work illegally, but there is a big black economy of illegal working. That's why we have increased immigration rates more than 100% since we came to power. So it's about getting rid of the reasons why they come. It's also about returning people. And the
one in, one out thing hasn't been a huge success, has it? So far, we're at 5,300 in and about 10 out.
But something has to explain the 50% drop in small boat crossings this year. The reason why that's an important model, actually, is that people need to know that if you spend a lot of money coming over here, there's a very high risk that you could just be returned straight back to France. Do you know what used to work, Jeremy? There was a time where 100% of them would be returned back to France because we were in the Dublin Agreement. Boris Johnson chose to pull us out of that with his reckless botched Brexit deal. We've left the Dublin Agreement. We can't just return people in the way that we used to be able to. That is one of the reasons why we've seen this industry start up. Another thing we can't do, we used to be in Eurodac, which was an intelligence service sharing information. You mentioned that they throw their documents in the bin. They do, and some of them arrive with false stories, and we don't even know what countries they come from. When we were in Eurodac, we could take their biometrics and we could link that to the European computer and we could see exactly what story they told in previous countries. We're no longer in that system. People in the Home Office are telling me that that is one of the single most important tools that they would have to police.
I'm not trying to stop you, Sam, because genuinely, I have the news, but that's one of the most interesting chats. And what I want to say is, and I mean this, I don't have to agree with you, you don't have to agree with me. That is the essence of debate. And as long as I'm doing this show, that is exactly what it's about. And I really mean this. I appreciate you coming on the show. Let's do it again some other time if you can. Thank you, Sam Rushworth, Labour MP for Bishop.
Welcome back to reality. What you just witnessed is not a slip of the tongue. It is the defining unspoken ideology of the political establishment laid completely bare on national television. When a sitting MP looks the public in the eye and claims undocumented migrants are drawn to the UK because Britain colonized the world, he gave the entire game away. This exchange matters because it exposes why the borders remain wide open. The establishment does not view illegal crossings as a national security emergency. They treat them as a historical debt to be repaid. They expect working-class taxpayers to surrender the safety, cohesion, and resources of their local communities as reparations for events from 2 centuries ago. Let's look at the hard facts they desperately try to hide. The claim that these boats carry vulnerable families is a statistical fabrication. Official Home Office data has consistently shown that roughly 90% of small boat arrivals are young, working-age men. These individuals traverse multiple safe European democracies like France, bypassing safe harbors solely to exploit Britain's soft touch system. Meanwhile, the public is forced to bleed roughly £8 million a day just to fund commandeered hotels. By early 2024, the Home Office was forced to admit that the asylum system was costing the British taxpayer an astronomical £4 billion a year. The government was bleeding roughly £8 million every single day just to commandeer hotels to house unvetted arrivals. You cannot tell struggling British citizens who are enduring record high tax burdens and crushing inflation that the cost of this crisis is merely a few pounds a week. And when challenged on solutions, the government immediately surrendered. In July 2024, on day one in office, Labour's very first major act was scrapping the Rwanda deterrent scheme entirely, signaling to criminal smuggling gangs that the borders were open for business. Politicians who lecture you about colonialism do not live next door to migrant hotels. They don't watch their local services buckle under the strain. They demand your tax money while treating national borders like an apology tour. The social contract is completely broken and the public is no longer buying the spin.